Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar here with HYCU. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm on the product team at HYCU, and the focus of this discussion is going to be on protecting Bitbucket, not only from the perspective of traditional backup and recovery, but also from ransomware protection and from a compliance perspective as well. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. I will make sure to address every single question that you have. If there's too many questions, I will make sure to personally email you. This will be recorded, that you will receive an email, and this will be available to you at all times. But with that being said, we've got a lot to discuss. And before we get into the subject matter, let's give you a quick introduction to who we are at HYCU. So at HYCU, we're the fastest growing data protection platform in the world. Our entire focus is making sure that we're able to protect your applications across your entire organization, from DevOps, ITSM, and production-ready applications as well. From an investment perspective, we're backed by Atlassian Ventures, by Bain Capital, Acru, Cisco, and Okta, all helping us achieve this mission of being able to protect data across different silos across your organization. You can also find us on the Atlassian marketplace as well, where you're able to try HYCU and protect things like Jira, Confluence, Jira Service Management, and also Bitbucket. A little bit about us as well. We're obviously a global organization. We're in over 78 countries with thousands of large organizations who trust us with their crown jewels, whether it's the Git repository, their applications on-prem, or other SaaS applications as well. They trust HYCU to be able to protect their data. Our main focus here is making sure that we're able to give you complete protection across the board, from Bitbucket to the rest of your Atlassian stack and beyond. And something that I'm very, very proud of is that we are, in this world of Atlassian, the only enterprise backup and recovery vendor recognized by Gartner for this as well. So with that being said, let's get into the subject matter. Why did we talk today about Bitbucket? What was our discussion point or reasoning behind having an entire discussion and demo focused on Bitbucket itself? Well, because of the criticality of Bitbucket. When you think Bitbucket, you think, this is a repository for developers. But when you think about the business, when you think about the type of data, the configurations that go into Bitbucket, it is as critical as a production application. This is the thing that you use to build, that you use to maintain, that you use to deploy. It is as critical as your tier one applications. And that rigor that you have on protecting tier one virtual machines or instances, you have to apply it to Bitbucket as well. And why is that? Well, think about it. This is where your source code is, your libraries, your dependencies, schema, scripts, testing code, configuration files, you name it. It's not just about your source code. This holds the intelligence across your entire DevOps stack, across your entire DevOps tool chain, everything from your Lambda functions to your stack sets and cloud formations. Hopefully not your keys, but we know that people have done that in the past, but also all types of YAML files related to your serverless and containerized applications as well. The point here is that Bitbucket holds the most critical data in your organization. So it's very, very important to have an honest conversation around how is it being protected today? What is the relationship that me as a customer of using Bitbucket on Atlassian Cloud, what responsibility do I have? What responsibility does Atlassian have? And the reason I mention this is because this is so critical to your organization to make sure that it's safeguarded, that it's accessible, that data can be recovered, and that you are protecting yourself from human error and from any type of cyber threats, external or insider threats as well. Now, with that being said, let's actually get into what is the role of protecting Bitbucket itself. What is your responsibility? Now, I'm actually going to ask a couple questions in the audience too. So one of the things I want to know is how are you consuming Bitbucket today? And how are you consuming maybe Jira, Confluence, and your other applications as well? Are you still on, hopefully not server, but running data center, or are you fully migrated to the cloud? It'll be very good because I can provide a little bit of context too throughout this conversation. But one of the things that I want to mention here is there's a very, very dangerous assumption here. Whether it's Bitbucket, whether it's your AWS workloads, whether it's Jira, whether it's any SaaS application. Once you've moved away from a data center deployment, it's very important to understand exactly what you're responsible for in Bitbucket. And what I mean by that is you kind of have to think about Atlassian Cloud and these applications as a parking garage. I know it sounds dumb. It sounds like a very simplistic example, but it really works. And I tell you this why. Let's say that you are going out with your family and you are getting dinner downtown and you would like to park your car. Well, what do? You go to a parking garage. When you're in the parking garage, what do you expect from it? You expect to be able to pay, to be able to access, and then to be able to make sure that once you come back from dinner and the bar, that your car is there, that your car is available and you can drive off, go home with your family. Now, what happens if you leave your window open and somebody takes an item from your vehicle, or somebody scratches your vehicle, or dents it, or even hits it, and there's an accident? What is the responsibility between yourself and the parking garage? Well, the parking garage does not take responsibility for any types of theft, damage, or vehicles, right? If somebody hits your car, you have to have car insurance. That is your responsibility as the owner of the vehicle. The same exact dynamic works within cloud applications. They are expected to maintain availability at the system level. What does that mean? Well, they have to maintain the 5 nines. They have to have disaster recovery. They have to have system level backups, and they have to make sure that if there is any incident, whether a supply chain or a specific regional outage, they have to be able to make sure that as quickly as possible, you can access Atlassian, that you can access Bitbucket. But what happens if somebody deletes something or you make a mistake inside of your tenant, inside of your project? Well, it's very, very hard for Atlassian to understand what is a soft delete, what is a good delete versus a bad delete. For them, you are simply a user managing all of your data, your repository, your configurations inside of Bitbucket. There's no way for them to know what is a good and a bad delete. This is why they don't take responsibility for the recovery of the data inside of your repository. If you don't have access to Bitbucket, it's on Atlassian. But if you delete something inside of the repository, it is your responsibility to get that back. It is not on Atlassian. And this isn't a bad thing about Atlassian. This is simply the dynamic of every single cloud platform, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure, Google, Atlassian. This is the same exact dynamic, and it's what's known as the shared responsibility model. And in fact, I've grabbed a snippet here for you of that shared responsibility model. And it tells you exactly what Atlassian does and what your role is. And specifically in your role, what Atlassian says is you have to create backups of your data. You have to create backups of your data. And many folks are going to ask, well, Andy, you just told me that Atlassian has system level backups. What are those backups being used for? Well, those backups are being used for disaster recovery, meaning when there is a massive outage, when there's a scenario where you have to enable replication and you have to fail over data, you also need your backups to reinstantiate. That's what Atlassian is using those backups for. Those backups are not there for you to say, Atlassian, can you please help me restore this specific issue in Jira that I deleted? That's not what they're being used for. And Atlassian explicitly states that that's not the reason that they're using it. So the dynamic here, and to be very, very clear, is that you have to have your own backups. You have to have your own backups of Bitbucket. You have to have your own backups of Jira, of Confluence, of Jira Product Discovery, of Trello, of any SaaS application that you're using, Miro, even the plugins. You have to have your own backup of that data. I'm going to give you a real life example of a customer of ours who went through this before HYCU, and it's the City of Tartu. This is a municipality, and they had a issue that we see all the time, which is the bulk deletion or change of assets within Jira Service Management. This is a big deal, and it can happen all of the time. In fact, it happens all of the time. This is one of those pesky scenarios where it's very, very hard to ensure permissions and protection rules on asset fields. Now, what happened after the deletion scenario? Logically, they went to Atlassian, and Atlassian mentioned, this is your data. And unfortunately, we can't help you with that. So the point here is that Atlassian is very specific, very honest, as they should be, as every cloud provider should be, around you have to make sure that you are performing your own backups. Now, don't get me wrong, they may try to help you, but there's no SLA behind that. There's no guarantee of that. It is very, very difficult to access their RDS backups and help you restore something specific. That is a doomsday scenario. So you have to make sure that when you're thinking through, that you have to be able to understand that backup is your responsibility. If there's anything that we get from today's presentation, it's that backup is your responsibility. Now, you may be thinking, well, Andy, what are the actual threats. What can actually happen to GitHub, to Bitbucket, to GitLab, to Jira, to anything like that? Well, let's talk about a couple of these common threats. The number one source of threats is always going to be human error. Always, always, always. This is something that no matter what happens, no matter what type of software, as long as there's a human using it, there's always going to be some form of a deletion. There's going to be an overwrite. There's going to be misconfigurations. There are always going to be scenarios where somebody is going to accidentally delete something, especially if you have a larger organization with many developers. Murphy's Law will always apply. So you will always bet on human error being a component here. Then you get less likely scenarios, but still extremely dangerous, and it happens more than you think. And one of those is insider threats. And many organizations think, well, no, I love my employees, they love me. There's no way anybody on my team is going to do that. Well, people get disgruntled, especially in larger organizations. Perhaps your offboarding policies aren't cleaned up. Perhaps your permissions aren't managed well. Perhaps you have contractors, suppliers, M&A activity. There's people who end up getting legitimate access to these applications that can incur damage if they are disgruntled. And the rule of thumb here is if you no longer know the names of all of your developers, you're now in the territory where a malicious insider could potentially happen. And of course, as we've seen in all Git repositories, it is a very common exploit. It is a very common target because it's a very, very high ROI scenario for a hacker. It's a very high ROI where if I'm able to compromise somebody, if I'm able to escalate privileges, if I'm able to access the Git repository, I can encrypt this. I can use this as leverage. I can steal IP. So it's very, very important to understand that the threats are real. These threats don't change whether you are consuming Bitbucket as in a data center or you're consuming it in the cloud. The point here is that this is not going away. There's so many different scenarios where data loss or configuration loss can happen as well. So let's talk a little bit about a checklist, about a couple of things that you're able to do that are the fundamentals that are your responsibility. And then we're going to talk about how HYCU is able to help you do so. So one of the things that we mentioned here is regardless of the decision that you make with HYCU, the first thing you have to make sure is that you're protecting your data. What I mean by this is the fundamentals, enabling MFA, but not just that. Atlassian provides, what used to be Atlassian Access and now is Atlassian Guard. There are a lot of capabilities that you already have and capabilities that you will have later in the year as well around MFA, around being able to limit and monitor access. This is something that you have to do with regular hygiene. This is one of the easiest areas where we see organizations struggle all of the time. So many of these larger major attacks and breaches that we're seeing are coming from bad access management, from escalated privilege, from social engineering of administrators themselves. So it's very, very possible for this to happen. So fundamentally, always enable MFA, limit permissions. Least privilege is very, very important. Branch permissions, being able to have review processes before things are merged. And also from a recovery perspective, you have to regularly back this up. It's not just us from a backup vendor saying this, it's Atlassian telling you you must back up Bitbucket. Whether you choose to do so from an export basis or you choose to script and schedule these backups or use a third-party solution like HYCU, you have to make sure that you can back up these repositories and that the data is actually stored off-site. What I mean by this is it's not valuable to store a copy on your hard drive, on your device, and provide a unencrypted piece of data in a single point of failure. You have to make sure that you are effectively storing this in a safe offsite location that is accessible to multiple members of your team. Many of our customers opt to even make sure that they have immutable copies of this in case there is a serious insider or external threat as well. But the most important piece here is, regardless of what backup strategy you have to make sure that you can test it. You have to make sure that you have tested the recovery of a project, the recovery of a repository. This is very, very critical. So if there's any questions, please add them to the chat. I want to really talk to you about the ROI, the reasoning behind why it's so critical to avoid manual operations and actually start protecting your data as needed. So now let's get into HYCU. Why are we here? Why are we talking about backup for Bitbucket and Atlassian? And the truth is that at HYCU, with R-Cloud, we are a data protection platform. Our goal is to protect all of your data at any point in time, regardless of where it is. And what we've been doing is actually following our customer's journey. So when HYCU first started, the majority of our customers, their most critical applications were on-prem. Whether it was Nutanix AHV or VMware vSphere and file share, that's where all of the critical data was, and still is in certain cases. And for many of you, you may be recently migrating from data center to Atlassian Cloud. If you're on data center, all this is literally running on your VMs right now. HYCU came from that world. We were protecting mission critical applications on-prem. That means even your Atlassian data center, even all of your other applications that used to be SharePoint Server were actually protected by HYCU on-prem. Now, what happened afterwards? Well, you saw the ability to actually host data center in the public cloud. And this came in the last couple of years and become really popular simply because obviously the cost management, the flexibility of cloud was very, very appealing to IT. Not only just folks thinking from the perspective of Atlassian, but simply from the perspective of their entire DevOps toolchain. And at HYCU, we scaled and evolved from just protecting on-prem applications to public cloud workloads, being able to make sure that you have native protection with native APIs for AWS, for Google, and for Azure. And we've won awards at every step of the way. We are the Google Cloud Partner of the Year for 2024, a top 5 solution within AWS. But the point is, we've been following our customer's journey. And now what we've seen is so many of our customers were migrating to Atlassian. They were migrating to Atlassian Cloud, and they needed to make sure that, one, they still had the same rigor of backups, the same ability to recover, and that same flexibility that they have with HYCU. And because of that, we additionally added to R-Cloud purpose-built data protection using native APIs for Atlassian Cloud. But remember, this is not just talking about the explicit backup of Bitbucket. This is making sure that your entire DevOps toolchain is protected as well, which is why within our cloud, within that same experience, where we're protecting critical data across the board, we have the broadest coverage of Atlassian Cloud, whether it's being able to protect Jira, JSM, product discovery, Confluence, Bitbucket, especially Bitbucket in today's conversation. And I realized that it's no longer called Jira software. And we also, what used to be known as work management, are able to protect that as well. But of course, every other service that is in your DevOps toolchain, even Terraform, even CloudFormations, these stack sets, these templates are very critical to your organization. Your security configurations like Amazon VPC, they're very, very important, and they must be backed up and recoverable. We want to make sure that within HYCU, you're able to protect all of that. And of course, your enterprise IT applications, things like Salesforce, DocuSign, Miro, and more. But what I want to pause here on before we get into the demo and show you how HYCU is able to work is our philosophy across security. Applications like Bitbucket, we cannot be laissez-faire around how we are protecting this. It might be easy to export something onto your laptop, to a hard drive, but you have to be very, very safe and secure in your approach to doing so, which is why we take a security-first approach at HYCU. So let's say that something does happen to your instance, whether it's Jira or Bitbucket, it's all running on Atlassian Cloud. Our philosophy is very simple. One, the backup system, the thing that you're using to actually make sure that you're protected and that you can recover your data, has to be accessible outside of Atlassian. If it is a plugin that lives inside of Atlassian, you are in trouble. Why? Well, what happens if there's an outage? What happens if there's a scenario where you can no longer access that? You always have to make sure that your backup, your last line of defense of everything that you can count on, is always going to be sitting outside of the Atlassian instance. And that is very, very critical that you have a logically separated backup server or backup system. And of course, I think everyone here knows the 3-2-1 rule. It's something that has been fundamental to IT from the beginning, ever since photography. But we firmly believe that these copies have to be offsite. They have to be offsite. This is why recycle bins are not backups, because they have to be offsite and only in your control. And they must be accessible if there is an external or insider threat or even a ransomware attack. These are the things that we have to guarantee. This is our philosophy at HYCU. But one of the things that we really focus on is making sure that regardless of the size of your organization, the size of data, that we can protect millions of objects with zero impact on performance. To make sure that you can meet your SLAs, that you can take backups however often you need. If you'd like to take those backups every 3 hours, it's your choice to do so, and that it must be done in an automated fashion. The entire goal of HYCU is that you spend minutes a week on backup. No more scripting, no more cron jobs, no more manual exports. This is simply a set and forget approach. But what's critical here is that your data is not held hostage, that you always have access to this data, that you have complete freedom to access it outside of Atlassian at any point in time, but that you're also making sure that you don't have a point solution that you built for Bitbucket, but you have something that protects your entire DevOps toolchain. And of course, that you work with a vendor that you can trust. Before I actually show you how this works with HYCU, there's something I want to stress here, which is where does that data go? When you have backups, where does that data go? Because this is a very, very critical answer every single organization, not just your security teams, should answer. And our approach at HYCU is simple. We highly recommend that you keep your backup copies in your control only, right? You now are leveraging Atlassian Cloud, a third party for your critical services. In order to then back it up, you do not want to add yet another third party that hosts your backup data. You want to keep everything in-house and in your control. Why? Risk happens. Third-party risk is real. I think everyone here saw a scenario where even organizations like Google and other vendors have accidentally deleted data itself. So one of the things that we always mention here is you want to have a complete control of your data. And that's what we do at HYCU. Think of us as an encrypted highway from the instance to your storage target. Now, you can send this data to your AWS bucket. You can send it to Google, to Azure, or even S3 compatible storage like Wasabi. And something that I want to emphasize here is HYCU doesn't store your backups. We can do so if you really want us to, but we highly, highly, highly recommend that you store backups in your control and that nobody, even HYCU, has access to this data. This means that you can control the data residency, not only where the data is stored, but where the data is processed as well, especially if you have geographical requirements and restrictions. And of course, you get to control the storage tier. You get to control how often you want to retain that data and the access controls and everything around that as well. And of course, you can enable immutability of that data as well. What does that actually mean? Well, if doomsday does happen, if the worst incident does happen, there's always going to be a clean, safe, separated copy that you can access to recover back from. This is the last line of defense. We see the industry continue to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on cybersecurity services, and as they should. But what we still see is successful attacks, especially in the world of SaaS. So what we always recommend is that there is no cost in having an offsite immutable copy of that data that you can restore from. That could be the difference between serious amount of disruption and serious amount of data loss as well. So with that being said, let's actually take a tour of HYCU and let's talk a little bit about what this looks like. And I'm going to show everybody what this does. So let me just make sure that let me stop sharing my screen. And then let me share that. Perfect. Hopefully if somebody in the comments can mention if you can't see your screen, please let me know, but I think I'm able to show it. So what you're seeing here is HYCU R-Cloud. This is a SaaS service where you're able to access all of your data. This is where you go to see, to manage, to protect your data. And of course, as we should have, we are MFA and SSO enabled. So let me sign in real quick. One thing to stress here, as I mentioned, HYCU is a SaaS. You can run this in the regions that are required by your organization, especially if your security team doesn't allow your information to leave certain countries, certain residency requirements. HYCU runs where you need it. One thing that I'm going to mention here too is we have the HYCU marketplace. This is where you go to understand exactly everything that you want to protect, whether it's Jira, whether it's something like Microsoft Entra ID, or obviously Bitbucket itself. And the reason we have this marketplace is because at HYCU, we have a development platform that has allowed us to scale with the expertise of ISVs, with the expertise of even Atlassian partners to be able to build, manage, and provide a purpose-built backup and recovery solution. So what you're seeing here is a full democratized view of data protection, where you're able to request support for an application, and you can guarantee that HYCU will do everything it can to deliver that application backup to you as fast as humanly possible. So let's go here into repositories and CI/CD. So one of the things that you'll notice here is you'll tell if it's something that HYCU has built or if it was built in conjunction with an Atlassian partner. So I'm very pleased to say that Bitbucket is one of those applications that we work very, very closely with an Atlassian partner as well. That's Microgenesis Technologies as well. So in combined with their expertise, we're able to continuously add more and more coverage to the marketplace. This is why we have over 80 integrations, 10 times more than the competition. But just like this marketplace, you're able to connect to every single service and start protecting it via an API. So if you choose to protect Bitbucket, you simply configure and connect via an API token. Now, once you do that, HYCU is going to automatically discover all of the projects that are associated to that API token. And the reason this is so important is because this auto discovery allows you to add policies very, very quickly. So let me grab a Bitbucket one here. So I've already identified a policy here. So as you can see, I've assigned a policy. And as that policy is working, I always know when it's compliant, what the backup status is. But how do you set it? Well, remember, a lot of the times organizations are actually having to script and schedule backups of Bitbucket. With HYCU, you simply can assign a policy in one click. So we have default policies that you can choose from, whether it's every 4 hours or every day, or you can create your own policy as well. So from there, you can say, look, some of these projects in Bitbucket are so critical to us. Let's have a customized policy for this. And for this, I'd like to take a backup every 4 hours, potentially because we have a high change rate. And then from there, I can say, well, I'd like to keep this for a year, or I'd like to keep that for longer. You get to choose. You have complete freedom between the policy, complete freedom between the retention period. And then you say, well, where do I want that data to go? That's where this is one of the core differentiators that only HYCU can do. You choose where that data goes. It connects to your Amazon S3. You choose the storage class. You optimize for cost, for performance, for security. You connect your cloud account. And all of a sudden, from that policy, you can send data there at any point in time. This now means that you have an offsite copy of Bitbucket in your control, not accessible to anybody else, that you can access at any point in time. Once you assign that policy, this works in perpetuity. You have notifications, you have reporting, you have full event, task, and management. And by the way, what I've shown you for Bitbucket applies to Jira, to Confluence. So let's say now there is an incident, or there's simply human error and we have to restore a repository. Well, with HYCU, what you're able to do is go in and actually restore a project or restore an individual repository. I'm going to show you what that looks like. I've actually just done a demo of this, a real recovery operation. I'll show you what that looks like. But it's not just across Bitbucket. It's also across Jira. So let's say that somebody deletes a specific attachment or some type of configuration, even in Epic. You can go and restore that individually versus having to do a bulk recovery operation every point in time. Same thing applies to Confluence. Same thing applies to other applications outside of Atlassian that we're able to support as well. So with that being said, although there's so many capabilities here, the whole point of HYCU relies around two things. One, that you have automated all backup operations, that you have backup assurance that you know that it's going to work, and that you can restore specific data when you need it, and that it's always offsite and protected. This is as critical as it gets to think about where you're protecting your source code, your configurations, your IP. Some of the crown jewels of your development team are in Bitbucket, and they must be protected as so. And from there, you're always able to track your protection status. You know exactly what's happening. You know exactly that Bitbucket is protected, and that your other Atlassian cloud services and anything else in your environment are protected. It's multi-tenant enabled, so you can make sure that you divide your engineering team, your DevOps team, everyone has access to the applications that they want to protect from one point. This eliminates data silos. This eliminates third-party risk. You have one place where you're able to restore that data. So with that, what I want to show now is what that actually looks like. And I've actually recorded this for you because I want to make sure everybody sees exactly how this operation works. So here it is a video of us deleting an actual repository. And it's kind of scary how easy it is to delete a repository. But once you've deleted that repository, usually you have to do a bulk recovery operation, assuming that you have a backup. And kudos to everybody already who is performing a backup. But you've deleted the repository. All you do is go to HYCU, select that specific project where the repository lives. We take a full catalog where we extract all of the data, everything that's associated to that repository, allow you to select which one, and then you can restore from there. This is as simple as one click where you're able to assign exactly the thing that you want to restore versus having to either rebuild or having to recover from a bulk operation. So you restore the repository that was deleted. You get to choose where you restore it from. And then from there, that restore is completed. That's it. That's how it works for a repository. That's how it works for any other part of your organization as well. And so what we're seeing in the video is here is then going to the repository as well, and then now seeing that this repository was updated 18 seconds ago. That's when it was actually restored back to production. So this is the whole focus. It's one-click operations to be able to make sure that you can protect Bitbucket. So let me make sure I can go to the next slide here. So what I'm going to have here in conclusion is there's no better way to do this than to just try it for yourself. So in the chat and in the Q&A, we're going to add a link to a free trial of Bitbucket. Everyone here for 14 days will be able to try this. We'll be able to see, perform a backup, perform a recovery operations themselves, and make sure that Bitbucket is always protected. But what I want to conclude here with is it's very dangerous to always assume that the vendor is responsible for your data, regardless of what the application is. The most important thing to leave this conversation with today is that you know exactly your risk profile, you know what you're responsible for, and that your team has taken action to make sure that you protect Bitbucket from an identity perspective because it's your responsibility, but also from a backup and a recovery perspective as well. With that, I want to thank all of you so much for your time, for your attention. I will address any questions that you have, but I want to make sure that you have access to the free trial, which is now posted on the chat as well. So thank you so much, and I hope everyone here has an excellent day.